Hi everybody, welcome back to part 6 of the Introduction to Java series. In this part, we are going to be learning about single dimensional arrays. A single array variable can reference a large collection of data. And once you create an array, the size is fixed. So let's first learn how to declare arrays. So I'm going to make a new package. Call it part 6. And in here we're going to do a new Java class. We'll call this array examples. And this is going to be a very simple class. I'm just going to show you different ways to declare an array. So let's make our main method. Public static void main string, throughout my little brackets, right? String args. So let's first learn the syntax of declaring an array variable. So I'm going to leave a little comment here. This is the syntax for declaring an array variable is the element type, little square brackets denoting that it's an array, and then the variable name. So this would be array variable. So for example, if we wanted to declare an array that held a list of integers, we would do int square brackets, and then we can call them my list. This declares an array variable. It has not actually set any values. So it's just an empty array. Now, if you want to say how many elements can be in the array, you have to define the size. So going down here, we'll go back first to our comment. So we had array variable as our name for our element type. So we set this, we can be array variable equals new element type square brackets and then the size of the array. And this would be an integer. So I'm writing array size. So you can see as comments, and then we're going to put that together, okay? So then you could say my list equals new int, and let's say that we want to hold 10 integers in this list, so 10. You could also put this in one statement, so you could say int bracket nums equals new int 10. And this line here is equivalent to these being two separate lines, except for the fact that this is called nums instead of my list. I'll comment this out. I'm going to write declaring in one statement. So slash here in case you end up uncommenting here. Okay. So now what we have done is declared an array variable called myList that can hold 10 elements of the type integer. So now we need to learn how to initialize our array. You can access each item in your array individually. You could do myList 0 equals 1, my list 1 equals 2, my list 2 equals, not count it, so 5. And you could go on and on and on all the way to my list 9. Because remember, in programming, we start counting at 0. So we hold 10 elements, but we start counting at 0. So it goes from 0 to 9. That would be 10 integers. So a better way to say this would be that your array list has 10 elements in it, and it holds the type integer. And then its indices go from 0 to 9. So let's just visualize this for a second. Here's another example. What we're doing here is we're declaring a double that is called myList, and it holds 5 elements in it. And if we're looking at the actual value here, I'm setting myList 0. So at array index 0, it is set to have the value 1.3, etc., etc., etc. So at an array element at index 2, we have a value of 3.7. So this is how you can visualize a single dimensional array. So for the remainder of this integer list, I've been setting 0, I have index 0 as 1, 1 as 2, 2 as 5. Well, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are actually all 0 because that is the default value for numerical primitive data types. For example, our double and our integers and our floats default to 0. Booleans default to false. So if we wanted to check these defaults, we could write a little program. So let's use our knowledge of loops, or for loops that we have done, to look at every single element in myList. So we're going to take that knowledge that we learned in part 5 and apply it to part 6. So we're going to write a for loop. For int I equaling 0. We're starting at 0 because our array indices are 0 base. So they start from 0 to the length of the array minus 1. 0 to 9 in this case, right? So int I equaling 0. I is less than my list dot length. I plus plus. So what will happen here is we're going to go from 0, then I plus plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 9. Then when 9 gets incremented, 10 will not be less than the length of the array 10, so we'll break out. So let's write a little outprint. So we're going to do system dot out dot print line, and we're going to do my list I. So this is I is representing our index. So we're going to print out 0, 1, 2, and these will have 1, 2, and 5, and the rest will be 0. So let's make sure I'm right. Right click, run. So 1, 2, 5, and then 0 for the rest because we didn't set them. So automatically our default value for numerical primitives is 0. So keep in mind the last element in our array, the last index is 9. So my list 9 is the last element in my list. If you put my list 10, you will get an array index out of bounds. So let's learn other ways to initialize an array, because this is a little tedious, right? We have to go through each one and go one by one and have a line for separate for them. It's kind of just a little annoying. So we can do an array initializer. So for example, we'll make a double this time. So a double, and we'll call it double nums equals curly bracket. And then you can do 1.9, 2.5, 7.6, 100.1. This automatically sets up your array for doubles, and then you don't need to write double nums, double, in this case we have 4, new double 4. So this initializer is equivalent to saying double nums equals new, I'm going to write numbers just so we don't have a conflict with our variable name. So new double 4, and then double numbers 0 equals 1.9, double numbers 1 equals 2.5, double numbers 2 equals 7.6, double numbers 3, which is the last element in double numbers, equals 100.1. So this line here is equivalent to all this. We saved a few lines of code, right? So this is called an array initializer. So I'm going to write a comment, array initializer, with one N, right? So let's write a little program. We're going to write in a program to initialize an array with some random stuff, and then we're going to use another method to do a sum. So let's make a new class. It's a new Java class, and we'll call this array methods. So we need our main method, right? So public static void main string args. So now you kind of understand a little bit further that our for our main method, it has one parameter, right? That takes an array of strings. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to write a method that sums up an array. Okay, so it's going to take our array and sum it up and give us back a value. But first, we need to set up an array. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an array that's a doubles. Okay, so we're going to make a double and call it numbers equals new double. In this case, let's say that it has 10. So I want to easily initialize my array, and I actually don't really care what's going to be in my new double of 10. So I'm going to make it a random value between 0 and 100. So what we're going to do is a for loop. So for int I equaling 0, I is less than numbers dot length, so I is going to be less than 10, I plus plus. And then we'll say numbers I equals math dot random. This is what we used in a previous part. This gives us a random number from 0 to 0.9. It's a double. So math dot random times 100, because I want to make a random number between 0 and 100, but it's going to be less than 100. So random number between 0 and 100. Not 0 technically, because it's a double. So this gives us a random number. You could make this a method. We could make a method. So let's say public static, and this will return a double array. So double, that's the return type. Our return type is a double with the square brackets, so a single dimensional array of type double. And then we can call it randomize array. And it takes in a double. Actually, it doesn't even need to take in a double. We could have it take in the length of the array. So we could have it take in the length of 10, right? So I'll show you this. So int, and we'll call this number of elements. Let's take this code right here and replace it with the properties that we need. So we're going to copy this line of code. So where we have 10, this is going to be our number of elements that is being passed in. Everything else will stay the same. And now we need to return numbers. So we're returning the double array numbers. So this returns number. So return number. Instead of having this line of code, we can say double numbers equals randomize array 10. So now when we call numbers, when we call randomize array, is returning us a random array of numbers this size that you passed in. So if you passed in 100, it's going to do this for 100. So now you've learned to initialize array with some input values and give them random numbers. And you have also learned how to return an array from a method. See, I'm sneaking in a lot of stuff here for you. So now let's write another method that sums all of our elements together. So in this case, we're going to loop through and we're going to add each one of numbers together. So we're going to make a little method here, and we'll call this public static, and it's going to return a double. It's going to return the sum for numbers or any double array that gets passed in. And because it's a double array getting passed in, all the elements should be double. So it's double. And we'll call this sum array. It takes in an array of doubles. And then we'll call this nums. So what we need to do here is have our sum being kept track of. So we make a double sum, and we can default it to 0. But if you don't set this to 0, it will automatically be defaulted to 0. And then we say for int I, very similar to the code up here. So for int I equaling 0, I is less than nums dot length I plus plus. And then we can say sum equals sum plus nums I. Now there's an easier way to write this with less typing. So the equivalent of this line would be sum plus equal nums I. This sum plus equal is equivalent to this line right up here. And now we need to return double. We need to return the sum that we've added up. So return sum. Let's have this function get called. So we're going to do system.out.println, and then we're going to call sum array, and we're going to pass numbers. And now we're going to learn what the sum is of our random array. We right click, run array methods. That's the sum of our array. Now remember, this is a random, so the next time you run it, it's going to be different. Or when you're running it versus my results, they're going to be completely different because we randomized our array. So let's do one more method. Let's find the largest element in our random array. So public static, and this will be a double that gets returned, and we'll call this find max, and it passes in a double nums. So first we need to hold the max. We have to have a temporary variable that's called max. So we're going to make a double max, and we default it to the first element in our array. So we can say equals nums 0. So the first element in our array is called the max. And now what we want to do is loop through our array and determine if the max needs to be updated. So for int I equaling 0, I is less than nums.length I plus plus. And we say if nums I is greater than the max, we need to update our max, right? So this is saying if whatever index we're at is greater than max, update max. So max equals num I, because it's bigger, nums I. And then we need to return our max, so return max. Now I did one little mistake, and it's not a big deal. I was defaulting my nums to 0, so technically I don't need to start at 0 on my for loop. I can start at 1. Now, starting at 0 is no big deal, but it's just improving the efficiency a little. There's no reason to compare the index 0 of index 0. They're going to be equal, right? So let's find out what the max is of our random array. So let's do system.out.print line, and we'll say find max for our numbers. And let's run this code. Remember, your answer is going to be different than my answer. So the max in my array is 84.9 and change. Yours will be different than mine because we are randomizing our array in this example. But congratulations, you've learned about single dimensional arrays. You've learned how to return a single dimensional array from a method. You've learned how to initialize an array using array initializers, such as right here. You've learned how to also just randomly update or populating your values. You've learned how to sum up, loop through a list, figure it out, and then sum it up, right? You've learned how to find the max element. And then with this, you also know how to find the min element, right? We just flip this sign to be less than, and this will be returning our min. So congratulations, you're now another step further in your Java journey, and I hope to see you next time.